So we see Higuruma making a rule where it's possible to transfer points between players, which ultimately nerfs Rule 8, and this is awesome. And I also totally forgot that this needed to be a thing first. In my previous review and spoiler videos, I kept talking about how they have to make like a rule to get Tsumiki out, and that's kind of like looking too far into the future because first they need to establish the ability to just move points between people first of all. Because remember, they were going after Higuruma or Kashimo because they wanted them to use their points to benefit them to get Tsumiki out. But rather than like straight up convincing them of their own volition to just use their own points or whatever, it would just make this all so much simpler if they were just able to move points between players. And also, like I said, it nerfs rule number 8 as to where if you have the same points for 19 days, you're subject to curse technique removal, which is death. And also considering that Yuji and Megumi were both individually going after their own possible rules, that meant that 2 were probably going to be added, 1 to switch points, and then 1 for whatever Megumi's going to use it for. Obviously for Tsumiki, but his rule is probably going to be nuanced. And then Higuruma winds up giving Yuji one of his remaining points. And also this brings me back to something else that I completely glanced over and I should have been paying attention to, because Gege was kind of telling us how this was going to happen before it even happened. Because when we do see the point standings originally in chapter 159, we see Kashimo has 100 and we see Higuruma has 102. And I should have realized that, oh, the guy with the 2 extra points is probably going to be the one that winds up transferring his 100 points, or using them at least. Also, can you please subscribe if you haven't already? I'm sure a lot of you watch these videos from the recommended, and that's cool, but could you also please subscribe? I mean, it's the holiday season. Maybe you're feeling a little generous. But then Higuruma's like trying to piece out of there, and Yuji's like, no, wait, you're an awesome character. Why don't you just join the main cast here and help us fight in the culling game, bro? That'd be cool, right? Everybody'd be down for that. But then Higuruma's like, nah, I can't join you because that would just make this series too good and too interesting, and I don't know if Gege wants that right now. But his excuse is because apparently he had killed the judge and the prosecutor from his origin story, which is revealed here for the first time. And before this, it was said that he pretty much gained those points for self-defense, and I assume that this is self-defense. I don't think he just straight up killed them for no reason, or they could be inadvertent victims of deadly sentencing maybe, because at the end of the flashback he was like, we're having a retrial. So I guess that meant that deadly sentencing did come into effect, and then the prosecutor and the judge here lost deadly sentencing just like how we saw Yuji did. And I guess either Judge Man killed them or Judge Man gave Higuruma the executioner's sword and he either did it of his own volition or Judge Man forced him. I think it might be the former, and maybe he felt justified because they were legitimately guilty, and since Judge Man gave him that verdict, it's essentially the same as if the judge that he's killing were to give the verdict to in an actual court, you know what I mean? But regardless, he says he's going to turn himself in because of this when the barriers open, and that he's not going to stay with Yuji because he'll just hate himself even more. Is this the last we're going to see of Higuruma? Absolutely not. For sure, he's coming back. I mean, Kenjaku wanted him in the culling game for a specific reason. And also, like I said, he's an awesome character. And he's pretty much set up as going to be like a new member of the team here. And I also talked about this in my spoilers video, but I also think he might be a replacement for Nanami. He is kind of like that adultish, you know, straight man type figure the way that Nanami was. Obviously, he doesn't have the quirkiness of Nanami, but I do think he would fill that void nicely. I just hope it doesn't wind up being this thing where he comes back at like the very end and then helps Yuji just for like 1 chapter or something and then dies maybe. I don't think I'm alone in saying that he's, you know, one of the more interesting storylines and just characters of the culling game so far, or at least since Gege has come back from hiatus. But anyway, we're coming to Megumi's boss battle here. We see him facing down this interesting guy named Reggie. He's here because he wound up getting tricked by Remy, who he thought was leading him to Higuruma, or at least that's what I thought it was. She wound up leading him to this guy who's covered in receipts for some reason. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with his curse technique. And Megumi revealing his Shikigami here is enough to convince Reggie that he's strong enough for him to offer him an invite to join his team. And that's understandable. Nothing really suspicious about that other than him having to be tricked, first of all. But obviously it's been established that, you know, people in the culling game kind of have this system going on where they're trying to weed out the weaklings. And that's a big part of it, because Reggie's going to explain that it's one of the things that Kenjaku expects and counts on. But anyway, he asks Megumi like, hey, what do you know about the culling game? And he says, it's a ritual for using cursed energy of players inside the barriers to take Japanese people to the other side so they're no longer human. That is the truth. That's essentially what Kenjaku wants to do, but he's just leaving out the whole part about Tengen being involved, because Kenjaku is trying to use Tengen, the abstract idea of a sorcerer's consciousness right now, as a method of fusing with these people to take them to the other side. If that's confusing, don't worry, because it barely makes sense. But anyway, Reggie chimes in here like somebody in the YouTube comments, and he's like, I think what you just said about using players' cursed energy is a bluff, or rather it's for a second or third plan. I think that for 3 reasons: the number of players, the differing levels of player skill, and the barrier rules. Suppose 1,000 players are equally divided among 10 colonies. That means each colony has 100. But among the players like Kashimo and Higuruma, much stronger sorcerers. He's aware of Kashimo and Higuruma because of the scoreboard. Everybody has access to that now. But anyway, going back to what I said about Kenjaku counting on the weeding out process, it actually goes into like the name of this game, the culling game. That's what this is. It's the culling. And in this case, the culling of the wheat. You're putting all like these woodland critters in like these boxes, and then each of these boxes you're dropping like a wolf in there, or like a tiger in this one, or like a lion in the other. You know what I'm saying? Until it's eventually just tigers, lions, and bears, and oh my's. And then once it comes down to all of the apex predators, Kenjaku is going to drop a bomb. Not a literal bomb, or maybe it is a literal bomb. He's going to do something that is surprising and significant. And whatever that is essentially what the series is about, because that's what it's all been accumulating to since going back to 1,000 years ago. That's why Sukuna is doing what he's doing, why Kenjaku is, why Yuji was born, is all meant for the moment of the apex predators coming together in the culling game in the year 2018 or 2019, whatever the year is right now. I think it's still 2018, right? Because it hasn't been that long after Halloween, right? I forget, I'm sorry guys. But then we cut to Kenjaku speaking with this round table that looks like this could either be like the board of a company, or like some kind of Illuminati, or some kind of Chinese shadow government, or maybe this is some kind of shadow jujutsu government. He's speaking in Chinese in this sequence, so much so that Gege doesn't even want just the typical reader to know what he's saying at first. It's like those moments in the movies where they don't give us subtitles when the characters are speaking another language. But anyway, when he's coming in, the Illuminati guys are saying sit down, and then he says thanks for inviting me. But anyway, whatever Kenjaku's bomb is, I guess it might be connected to this Chinese Illuminati here. And also another interesting thing about China, and there's no way that I ever would have connected this myself if I wasn't coincidentally asked about this earlier this year. But when Tsukumo showed up in the Shibuya arc, she had like that Chinese dress shirt thing on. But somebody asked me like, is she Chinese? And I was like, I don't know. That's a good question though. And then after I saw Kenjaku speaking Chinese here, it jogged my memory, and I was like, oh wait, is Tsukumo Chinese? Is she tied to this somehow? Because I know Gege wants us to think that she's suspicious in some way. And at this point, it seems like she's pretty much face, but she might be a heel, or maybe she's like a true neutral as to where she is working with Kenjaku, but also Jujutsu High at the same time? Probably not. Occam's razor says that she's probably a good guy, right? But just wants to seem suspicious. Maybe she's just a red herring. I'm not really sure. Let me know your best Tsukumo theories in the comments. But anyway, Reggie's trying to build up this team because he doesn't want to be victim to whatever Kenjaku's doing. And we actually see one of his teammates here, and it's just this random guy who tries to attack Megumi from the back, but he gets the better of him, and he tosses him outside, and he winds up getting slammed down with the assistance of Nu. But Reggie randomly winds up taking out the Divine Dog Totality that he has with like double Michael Myers knives in his mouth. So I guess that's also his curse technique. That's interesting. I thought it had something to do with receipts. I mean, I guess it still does. Maybe he can generate items that are on the receipts. You know, like whatever was purchased on it, like let's say 2 butcher knives here, he could just generate them and use them as weapons maybe? I'm just taking a guess. I mean, it's probably not that, but that does seem like it could be a Gege curse technique, right? Then Reggie's like, oh, I get it, Megumi. You're holding back because you don't want to kill us because you need our points. But if you don't fight to kill, you'll wind up dead too. And then we randomly see this eyeball falling from the balcony, and then it like explodes in Megumi's face. Now, if you're confused by this as well, that's fine. You're meant to be. This isn't explained. We don't know what's going on here. Now, this is probably somebody's curse technique, but whose is it? Is this like the direct result of the curse technique, or is this like New's eyeball because he was flying around out there? Is this Nobara's eyeball for some reason? Or is this a part of Reggie's technique? Did somebody buy an eyeball? Not really sure, but let me know what you think about this in the comments, guys. And if you like the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. See you next one.